Karen stormed down my driveway screaming at the tow truck driver to hook up my SUV. Within minutes, the truck was backing up and chains were clanking. But when the driver leaned down and saw my plate, he froze. And that's when everything turned upside down. I heard metal clank just as Karen's voice rose over the hedge. There it is, there. He keeps that beast wherever he wants. Covenant violation. Her vowels carried down the cul-de-sac. I stepped onto the porch with a mug gone cold, watching her plant herself at the property line. Morning to you too, Karen, I said, keeping it even. My SUV sat where it always sat, flush behind the sidewalk, not blocking a thing. Sun striped the hood, the front plate flashed once. She didn't notice. She jabbed a manicured finger at the car. Section 14C. Oversized vehicles may not be stored in public view overnight. I told you. I emailed you. I printed the guidelines and taped them to your door. You taped them to my hibiscus, I said. And the HOA definition of oversized is height plus gross weight. We're under. Also, this is my driveway. Karen scoffed so hard her sunglasses slid. Driveway, street, same thing to a civilized neighborhood. Rules are rules. Everyone else follows them. Across the street, Mr. Patel watered his lawn and pretended not to watch. A curtain twitched in the tutor next door. Karen thumbed through a blue binder bulging with plastic sleeves. Tabs read like battle flags. Parking, trash, landscape complaints. She thrust a printout, grainy photos of my driveway. Documented, she announced. I've reported you 3 times. The board will convene. You are the board, I said. You and your friend on Birch. She ignored that, flipping to a dog-eared page. The association reserves the right to seek remedies, including fines, liens, and towing. Towing requires a violation on common property, I said. This slab is deeded to me. Want to see the survey? She smiled, thin and victorious. No need. I already called a tow. A drip of coffee slid down my knuckle. You called a tow to my home for my car parked on my lot. Someone has to protect property values. She squared her shoulders. You brought this on yourself. I looked at the front plate, plain, stamped, unmistakable to anyone who cared to read it. I had no appetite for peacocking. Karen, I said. Call it off. You're wrong on policy and out of your depth on the rest. The rest, she snapped. What rest? A for sale sign clicked in the breeze. Heat winked off windshields. I could have explained the plate, the appointment that put it there, the letter folded in my desk, the morning the governor shook my hand and said, "We appreciate what you're doing." I could have ended it in a minute. Instead I let a little rope play out. You'll see, I said. Her lips thinned. Non-compliance will be met with consequences. She lifted her phone and hit speaker. A dispatcher answered. Diesel rumbled on the other end. Karen shot me a look that said, "Be humbled." I'd like you to state for the record, she told the air, that the vehicle is a black late-model SUV, blocking sightlines and non-compliant with architectural standards. It's not blocking anything, I said, but the dispatcher was repeating the address. Karen hung up, triumphant. She started taking photos again. License plate, driveway angle, my porch number. Evidence, she said. If you try to intimidate me, I'll have that on video too. I stayed on the steps. Karen, how long have we been neighbors? 2 years, she said. In 2 years, have I ever asked anything of you? You've asked to be above the rules. I've asked to be left alone. She made a sound like a laugh swallowed the wrong way. People who want to be left alone have something to hide. Our street had the kind of quiet that made passing trucks sound like parades. I heard the diesel before we saw it, a low growl rising. Karen heard it too and brightened. She hugged the binder to her chest. You see, she said. Consequences. What would you do, I asked, if your neighbor called a tow on your car for no reason? A few phones angled our way. Mr. Patel coiled his hose and sat on his brick edging like theater seating. Karen pivoted to face the street, chin high. For a microsecond I saw the person beneath the performance, afraid of losing control. Then the truck swung into view. White cab, steel bed, logo scuffed by years of work. Air brakes sighed as it slowed at the corner, then rolled toward my driveway like a verdict. Here we go, she whispered. The driver, still a house away, stuck an elbow out and checked addresses against a crumpled ticket. The engine note deepened. Diesel braided into hot grass. Last chance, I said. She didn't look at me. Hook it. The amber bar threw flashes across garage doors and minivans. Shadows lengthened with each pulse. My mug was empty. I set it on the step and slid my hands into my pockets. The plate on my SUV flashed again, dismissed by the one person who most needed to see it. The truck eased past the mailboxes, gravel crackling. Neighbors found excuses to come outside. A trash can repositioned, a plant misted, a dog that simply had to inspect the exact center of the sidewalk. Life arranged itself into a half-circle facing my driveway. Karen stepped forward, heels clicking. "You can put the dolly right here," she called, pointing at the seam where concrete met street. "He's non-compliant. The board authorizes tow at owner's expense." She loved authorize. The driver tapped the brake and the cab dipped. For a breath, everything held, the air, the sun, the neighborhood's inhale. A breeze lifted the edge of a receipt under my wiper and set it flapping like a small white flag. The turn signal ticked. What? Twice. The tow nosed in, bumper angling toward our curb, headlights now sweeping across the asphalt and up the face of my house, then arcing wide until they washed the full width of my drive, pouring light over chrome and paint and steel. As the tow truck's headlights swung across my driveway, the tow truck's amber lights flickered against the windows of nearby houses as it hissed to a stop in front of my driveway. The air brakes exhaled with a heavy sigh, the kind that turned heads even farther down the street. Conversations paused, sprinklers ticked, and for a moment, the whole cul-de-sac seemed to lean in. Karen marched forward like she was leading a parade. She waved her binder in one hand and jabbed toward my SUV with the other. "Right here. This is the one. Oversized vehicle, non-compliant. You'll need the dolly." The driver climbed down from the cab slowly, boots hitting asphalt with a muted thud. He was mid-40s, sunburnt at the neck, a ball cap shadowing his eyes. His uniform bore the tow company's name stitched in red, faded from too many washes. He carried a clipboard tucked under one arm. "Afternoon," he said, neutral, professional. Karen didn't let him finish. Yes, good afternoon, thank you for coming so quickly. We've had issues for weeks now. This man thinks he's above the rules. Parked like this day after day. It's lowering our property values." The driver glanced at me, then back to her. He adjusted his cap. "You the owner?" he asked, jerking his chin toward the SUV. "Yes," I said from the porch. "And it's parked on your driveway?" "Exactly where it belongs," I replied. Karen cut in before the driver could respond. "Driveway, street, yard, it doesn't matter. The rules are clear. No oversized vehicles in sight. I'm the HOA president, so I have the authority." She puffed her chest as if saying it made it real. The driver scratched his jaw. "Ma'am, usually we get called for cars blocking hydrants, red zones, that sort of thing. Private driveways are a different matter." Karen slapped her binder open to the tab labeled parking. Plastic sheets rattled in the breeze. "It's right here. See. Section 14C. Towing is a remedy for repeat violations." I spoke up calmly. "Sir, this is my property. My vehicle is registered, insured, and legally parked. There's no violation of city code." The driver shifted his weight, caught between us. "Look, I just follow the ticket I'm given. Says here to tow a black SUV, plate number ending in," he squinted at the paper. 42. "That's mine," I admitted. "But this call shouldn't have been made in the first place." Karen laughed, sharp and victorious. "See? He admits it. Go ahead, hook it." The driver sighed, set the clipboard on the hood of his truck, and began lowering the heavy steel arms of the dolly. The chains clanked as they slid, a metallic promise of what was about to happen. The sound made neighbors step closer, some crossing their arms, others raising phones. "You're really going to do this?" I asked him. "Buddy, I don't have a choice," he muttered. "Orders are orders." Karen folded her arms with a smug little smile. "Should have followed the rules." The driver crouched low, flashlight clipped to his vest. He angled toward the SUV's front end, ready to line up the dolly with the tires. His boots ground against gravel as he moved in. Karen hovered above him like a general over her soldier. "You'll want to hook the left side first," she advised, as though she knew anything about the process. "This man has been nothing but trouble. He thinks he's special." The driver grunted without answering, pulling one of the hooks forward. I could see his expression tighten slightly, as if something about this job didn't sit right. "Sir," I said, my voice even, "before you touch that car, I'd appreciate it if you checked the front plate." Karen spun on me, her voice shrill. "Don't waste his time. That plate doesn't mean a thing. Probably vanity, probably fake. Just get it on the truck." The driver, still crouched, flicked on his flashlight. The beam cut across the chrome grille, dust motes dancing in the glow. The SUV's plate caught the light, sharp, stamped, unmistakable. He froze for a beat, squinting. His lips moved, silently sounding out the raised lettering. Karen rolled her eyes. "What are you waiting for? Hook it. The driver leaned closer, running his hand just shy of the plate's edge, not daring to touch it yet. The flashlight beam steadied, tracing every number, every letter, every insignia embossed on the metal. A ripple went through the small crowd of neighbors. Mr. Patel stood, his hose forgotten, eyes narrowing. Two teenagers with scooters whispered to each other. Everyone felt something had shifted. Karen bent down impatiently. What's the holdup? The driver didn't answer right away. He adjusted the angle of his flashlight, checking again, slower this time. His jaw tightened. I said hook it. Karen snapped, stamping her foot against the driveway. The driver looked up at me across the beam of his flashlight, his expression different now, half doubt, half recognition. Is this real? He asked quietly, almost to himself. Karen scoffed. Of course not. Don't let him fool you. The driver didn't move, didn't lift the chain. His flashlight stayed steady on the plate, the reflection burning into his eyes. And then, in that hanging silence, the atmosphere on the street changed. The driver suddenly stood, flashlight still in hand, his expression frozen in disbelief as he looked straight at me. The street had gone so still you could hear the cicadas beyond the fence line. The tow truck's amber lights pulsed across the siding of my house, each blink cutting the air in staccato flashes. And in the middle of it all, the driver just crouched there, flashlight beam steady on the front of my SUV, like a man staring into something he wished he hadn't found. He stood slowly, knees stiff, wiping his palms against his uniform. His face was pale under the ball cap, and when his eyes finally met mine, there was nothing neutral left in them, just a kind of recognition that made Karen bristle. Well, she barked, binder clutched to her chest. Hook it already? What are you waiting for? The driver didn't move. He glanced back down at the plate, then back up at me. His lips parted, but words seemed reluctant to leave. Karen stomped closer, the sharp click of her sandals against concrete breaking the silence. This is ridiculous. He's manipulating you. Tow it. Now. But the driver shook his head almost imperceptibly, like he was arguing with himself. He lifted his clipboard and flipped through the paperwork, as if the ticket could make sense of what his eyes had just seen. His hand trembled slightly. I stayed where I was, calm on the porch. I could feel every phone in the neighborhood pointed in our direction, every set of eyes waiting for someone to crack. I wanted Karen to crack first. Sir, I said evenly, you saw the plate. You know what it means. Karen spun around, her face flushed. It doesn't mean anything. Vanity plates are everywhere. People buy them at flea markets. He's bluffing. The driver didn't look at her. He muttered under his breath something like, I've only seen one of these once before. Karen leaned in, voice sharp. What did you say? He ignored her, crouched again, flashlight sweeping slowly, deliberately, across every detail. The embossing, the insignia, the numbering that wasn't vanity at all. The neighbors crept closer. Mr. Patel cleared his throat nervously as if about to speak, but thought better of it. Two kids on scooters had dropped them on the sidewalk, wide-eyed at the scene unraveling. Even the dog down the street had stopped barking, sensing the tension. Karen laughed, a forced, brittle sound. You're being played. Don't you see? This is exactly how he operates. Pretending to be someone important so he can break every rule. The driver finally stood again. This time he locked eyes with me across the driveway. Is this official? He asked, his voice lower, cautious. I didn't answer with words. I just let the silence sit, the plate glinting in the glow of his flashlight like it was answering for me. Karen exploded. This is absurd. If you don't hook that car in the next 30 seconds, I'm calling your supervisor. She whipped out her phone, thumb poised dramatically over the screen. The driver stepped back from the SUV, shaking his head. Ma'am, I don't think you understand what you're asking me to do here. Karen's mouth fell open. What I'm asking? I'm the president of this HOA. I have the authority. The driver glanced around, aware of the audience gathering on the sidewalks. His voice grew firmer. With respect, HOA authority doesn't override state-issued designations. And this plate? He stopped himself, eyes narrowing at me. This plate is protected. The words hit the air like a dropped stone. Whispers rippled through the small crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Karen flushed crimson. Protected? What does that even mean? This is a subdivision, not the White House. The driver ignored her and turned fully toward me. His hands flexed at his sides, nervous energy spilling through. Sir, if this is what I think it is, I can't touch this vehicle. Not without putting myself in serious trouble. I said nothing, just gave a small nod. Karen screeched, You can't be serious. She shoved the binder against his chest. Look at the bylaws. It's in writing. He didn't take it. He stepped back, holding up a hand. Lady, I don't care what your binder says. If that plate is real, I'm not laying a finger on this truck. Period. The neighbors erupted in murmurs now, no longer pretending to be discreet. Phones were out in plain view, recording openly. A few people even smirked, enjoying the unraveling of Karen's control. Karen's composure cracked. Then fine, she shouted, stabbing her finger toward me. If you won't do your job, the police will. I'll call them right now. Her words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, everything went quieter still. The tow truck idling, amber lights flickering, neighbors holding their breath. The driver's face tightened. He looked from her to me, then back to the plate one last time. He muttered almost inaudibly, "Governor's fleet, it can't be." Karen already had her phone pressed to her ear, pacing like a general summoning reinforcements. Her voice rose as she gave the dispatcher my address, exaggerating every syllable, painting me as some dangerous violator. I stayed silent on the porch, arms folded, letting her dig the hole deeper. The driver shut off his flashlight, shoved it back into his vest, and shook his head in disbelief. Karen ended the call and snapped her phone shut with a smirk. There. The cops are on their way. And when they get here, we'll see just how special you think you are. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder with each second. The tow driver stepped back, eyes still locked on me, and whispered, "God help her if that plate is what I think it is." The sirens grew louder, rising over the roofs like a storm rolling into the cul-de-sac. Red and blue flashes pulsed faintly at the far end of the street, bouncing against windows. Neighbors leaned closer to the curb, some whispering, some pretending to fuss with hedges just to stay outside. Phones remained lifted, small glowing rectangles framing the chaos. Karen planted herself at the end of my driveway, binder clutched to her chest like armor. She was pacing in small, tight circles, muttering lines she clearly intended to repeat to the officer. Dangerous, oversized, repeated violations, disrespectful. Her voice cracked with adrenaline. The tow truck driver leaned against his rig now, arms crossed, flashlight still dangling from his vest. His jaw worked like he was grinding down words he couldn't say out loud. He kept glancing at the SUV's plate, then at me, then back again. He looked like a man who had accidentally opened a door he was never meant to see behind. The SUV itself gleamed quietly, a black mirror catching the dying sun. And on its front, the plate reflected red with each pulse of the tow truck's light. The insignia wasn't decorative. It wasn't vanity. It was the seal stamped with authority that carried a weight Karen hadn't begun to grasp. The squad car finally swung around the bend, tires crunching the asphalt. Its headlights swept over the whole scene. The tow truck, Karen waving her arms, me calm on the porch, the crowd at the edges. The car rolled to a stop, engine rumbling low. Karen darted forward, nearly tripping over her own shoes in her eagerness. She waved at the officer as if she'd summoned him personally. "Here. Officer, thank goodness. It's about time. We've got a repeat offender, and the HOA has had enough. This oversized vehicle is a danger and a violation, and he refuses to comply." The officer stepped out slowly, tall and broad, one hand resting on his belt. His face was calm, professional, unreadable. He scanned the scene, the neighbors, the tow truck, Karen's frantic gestures, me silent on the porch. His gaze lingered on the SUV. Karen thrust her binder forward. "Here, documentation, section 14C clearly states." The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, one thing at a time. Whose vehicle is this?" I raised my hand slightly. "Mine, officer. Parked in my own driveway." Karen spun toward him, outraged. "Don't let him fool you. He's been breaking rules for weeks. I called the tow, but the driver got spooked. You need to enforce this now before it gets out of hand." The officer tilted his head. "Tow on a private driveway?" He gave the driver a look. The tow truck driver shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I was called out, but I'm not sure I can touch this one. That plate?" He trailed off, shaking his head. Karen cut in sharply. "The plate means nothing. Vanity. Fake." The officer walked toward the SUV, slow, deliberate. He crouched low, letting the patrol car's headlights spill over the metal. He traced the numbers with his eyes, then the seal, then the insignia etched deep. His face changed, not dramatically but enough that the neighbors saw it. Enough that a few gasps rippled through the crowd. He stood up, dusted his hands against his pants and turned to me. "Sir, I'll need to see your registration and license." I walked down the porch steps, calm as ever, and handed him both. He flipped through them, nodded once, and radioed into his shoulder mic, "Control, Run a confirmation on plate designation 47 GOV. The radio crackled back. Confirmed. Active government plate. Flagged as part of the governor's security fleet. The officer's eyes flicked to mine, steady now. Thank you, sir. He handed my documents back with care. Karen's voice screeched higher. That's not possible. He forged those papers. He's bluffing. You can't let him get away with this. The rules are clear. The officer turned to her. His tone was still calm, but his patience was thinning. Ma'am, this plate is authentic. This vehicle is legally protected under state law. Towing or interfering with it could be a criminal offense. The tow truck driver muttered under his breath, "Told you?" and stepped further away from the SUV. Karen gawked at the officer, then at me, then back at the SUV like it had just transformed in front of her. Her face drained of color. Protected? What do you mean protected? This is a neighborhood, not a government facility. The officer straightened his shoulders. Protected means what it sounds like. You have no authority here, ma'am. Calling a tow on this vehicle was not only unnecessary, it was reckless. Karen sputtered, binder shaking in her grip. But the HOA. The bylaws. The officer didn't raise his voice, but the steel in it cut her off. HOA bylaws don't override state law. And certainly not a governor-issued plate. The neighbors murmured louder now, phones capturing every second. Some shook their heads, others smirked. Mr. Patel muttered something in Hindi that made the teenagers laugh quietly. Karen's hands trembled. Her binder slipped, pages scattering onto the street. She dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather them, still babbling about rules and property values. Her performance was unraveling in real time and everyone was watching. The officer sighed and gestured to her. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back from the vehicle. Right now. Karen froze mid-motion, still clutching half a page. Step back? From his car? But I'm the one who called. The officer's voice hardened. Step back. Karen rose slowly, binder clutched to her chest, but instead of stepping back, she whipped out her phone again. Fine. If you won't enforce the rules, I'll call higher authorities myself, she shouted. And as she pressed dial, the officer's hand slid closer to his cuffs. The patrol car's lights painted the cul-de-sac in harsh reds and blues, a pulse that made Karen's frantic pacing look even more unhinged. Her phone was pressed to her ear again, her voice sharp and clipped as she rattled off something about higher authorities, as if someone in some office miles away would care about a black SUV in a driveway. The officer exhaled through his nose, clearly unimpressed. He stepped closer to me, voice low but carrying just enough weight that the neighbors could hear. Sir, thank you for staying calm. Can I confirm again, this vehicle is yours? I handed him the registration and my ID. He examined them under the flickering patrol lights. The seal on the paperwork gleamed faintly, embossed and undeniable. His eyes tracked each line deliberately, like he wanted to give Karen every chance to see that this was not forged, not a trick, but the real thing. Karen stormed up to us, binder under one arm, phone still clutched in her hand. Don't be fooled, officer. He's clever. He fakes documents, he lies, he manipulates. I've documented everything, emails, photos, timestamps. The officer's jaw tightened. Ma'am, step back. Let me do my job. But Karen didn't budge. She waved her phone at him. I'm on hold with state transportation right now. They'll confirm he's lying. Just wait. Ma'am, the officer interrupted, his voice harder now, I already ran the plate through dispatch. It came back as an active designation under the governor's security fleet. There is nothing fake about it. Karen blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish caught out of water. That can't be right. The tow driver leaned against his truck, rubbing the back of his neck. Lady, I told you. I've seen one of those before once. Military base lot. You don't mess with them. Karen whirled on him. You stay out of this. You were supposed to do your job. He raised both hands defensively. My job's not worth losing my license, or worse. The neighbors chuckled softly at that, whispers spreading through the crowd like sparks across dry grass. Phones angled in closer, zooming on Karen's face, on the officer's calm stance, on the SUV gleaming quietly in the drive. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. This is a conspiracy. He's paying you all off. I'm not crazy, I'm protecting this neighborhood. The officer lifted his shoulder mic. Dispatch, confirm status again, plate number 47 GOV. The radio crackled back, firmer this time. Confirmed active government plate, registered under state fleet. Do not tow or interfere. Special designation noted. The officer clipped the mic back. He turned to Karen, his patience officially spent. Ma'am, do you understand what that means? Karen's eyes darted wildly between him, me, and the neighbors. It means nothing. It means you've all been tricked by a fancy plate and some fake paperwork. I'm not backing down. The officer stepped closer, lowering his voice. It means if you or anyone else tampers with this vehicle, you could be facing charges that go way beyond an HOA dispute. Do you understand me? Karen stumbled backward a step, binder slipping slightly in her grip. Her bravado wavered, but only for a second. She clutched the binder tighter, her voice shrill again. No. The board has rules, and if the state won't enforce them, then we will. Her defiance made the neighbors gasp. A few shook their heads in disbelief, whispering to each other about how far she was willing to go. The officer sighed, turning back to me. Sir, you're fine. Everything checks out. I apologize for the disruption. I nodded. Not your fault, officer. Thank you. Karen shrieked. You can't just take his side. She darted toward the SUV suddenly, binder clutched under one arm, her free hand reaching out as if she intended to rip the plate right off with her bare fingers. The officer moved fast. His hand shot out, catching her wrist mid-lunge. Papers from her binder flew everywhere, scattering across the driveway like leaves in the wind. Enough, he barked. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Right now. Karen struggled, trying to twist free. I won't. He's deceiving all of you. He thinks he's untouchable. The officer's grip tightened just enough to stop her flailing. His other hand hovered near his cuffs. The message was clear. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Someone said, she's lost it. Another whispered, this is going viral for sure. The tow driver shook his head slowly, muttering, never seen anything like this. Karen's face turned crimson as the officer released her wrist and shoved her back a step. That's assault on a protected vehicle, he warned. One more move like that and I'll have no choice but to detain you. For the first time all night, Karen faltered. She looked around wildly, realizing how many phones were pointed at her, how many witnesses were capturing every second of her meltdown. Her breathing came fast, shallow. She clutched her binder like a life raft, but its contents lay scattered across the asphalt for everyone to see, half-baked complaints, blurry photos, angry notes scrawled in the margins. Still, she wasn't ready to surrender. You're all blind, she spat, voice trembling. Blind to corruption, blind to arrogance. If the governor thinks he can plant his fleet in our neighborhood without following our rules, he's wrong. And so is this man. The officer's eyes narrowed. Careful, ma'am. Karen's voice cracked on the last word, but she held her ground. The neighborhood watched in silence, waiting to see how far she would push. The officer turned toward her fully now, one hand resting firmly on his cuffs. Ma'am, I'll give you one last warning. Step away and calm down, or I will detain you for obstruction. The neighbors leaned in, holding their breath as Karen's jaw set stubbornly and she took one deliberate step closer to the SUV. The cul-de-sac had gone almost silent except for the stutter of police lights and the idling growl of the tow truck. Every neighbor was outside now, some in slippers, some clutching cups of coffee gone cold, all gathered like an audience at an unplanned play. Phones hovered at shoulder height, recording every second. Karen stood trembling at the edge of my driveway, binder pressed tight against her chest as though it could shield her from reality. Pages still littered the ground, fluttering under the soft breeze. Photocopied bylaws, blurry photos of parked cars, handwritten complaints scrawled with exclamation marks. Each sheet told the same story, an obsession dressed up as neighborhood stewardship. The officer lowered his hand from his cuffs but didn't step back. His tone was steady, commanding. Ma'am, I'll ask you once more. Step away from this vehicle. You've crossed the line from complaint into obstruction. Karen's lip trembled, but she forced her voice into a brittle sharpness. Obstruction? I'm protecting our property values. I'm protecting the community. That's what an HOA president is supposed to do. The officer didn't flinch. Your community doesn't need protecting from a legally registered vehicle on private property. Especially not one designated under the governor's fleet. A ripple went through the crowd again. Neighbors whispering governor like the word carried more weight than steel. Karen's face flushed hot. No, it's not true. He forged it all. That seal, those papers, they're fake. Look at his smug face. You're all falling for it. The officer turned back toward me, calm as ever. Sir, thank you for your cooperation earlier. Just for thoroughness, do you mind if I hold your registration up for the crowd? I nodded and handed it back. He raised it high, the embossed seal catching the police lights, unmistakable and legitimate. The neighbors leaned closer, phones zooming in. Whispers turned into quiet chuckles. Karen shook her head violently, binder slipping further from her grip. No. You can't just parade his lies like truth. I have evidence. I've documented everything. She dropped to her knees suddenly, scrambling across the asphalt to scoop up the scattered pages. The neighbors gasped as she clawed at each sheet, stuffing them back into her binder. Some pages caught under tires, others blew into hedges. One floated into the gutter, soaked instantly by sprinkler runoff. Karen? Mr. Patel's voice was soft but cutting. He'd stepped closer now, shaking his head. You need to stop. You're embarrassing yourself. She shot him a look so venomous it could have curdled milk. Stay out of this. You all let him get away with everything. You're cowards. I'm the only one fighting for order here. The tow driver stepped forward then, voice low but firm. Lady, you almost cost me my job tonight. If I'd hooked that SUV without looking, I'd be finished. You don't know how close you came to dragging me down with you. Karen ignored him, still scrambling for papers. She held one aloft, a grainy photo of my SUV from 2 weeks prior. See? Proof. It's been here every night. Non-compliant. The officer stepped forward, plucked the photo from her hand and held it up for everyone to see. This is a picture of a car parked in a driveway. That's not a violation of any law, HOA or otherwise. The crowd erupted in low laughter now, not cruel but incredulous. A few neighbors even clapped softly, as if the absurd theater had reached its punchline. Karen's voice cracked as she shouted over them. You're all blind. Blind to corruption, blind to arrogance. If we let him break one rule, what's next? Trash cans in the front yard? Broken fences? This place will crumble. The officer's patience finally snapped. His voice rang out across the cul-de-sac. Ma'am, the only thing crumbling right now is your story. And everyone here is watching it happen. The neighbors went quiet at that, the weight of his words settling. All eyes fell back on Karen. She stood slowly, binder hanging open at her side. Her chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. The fight drained from her shoulders, replaced by a wild, glassy look in her eyes. You'll regret this, she whispered hoarsely, pointing one trembling finger at me. All of you will. You think he's untouchable, but he's not. The officer squared his stance, hand resting lightly on his cuffs again. That's enough, ma'am. If you continue threatening your neighbors, I will have no choice but to detain you. Do you understand? Karen's gaze darted to the phones aimed at her. She saw herself reflected back, red-faced, binder slipping, a caricature of the authority she thought she wielded. For the first time that night, the certainty in her voice faltered. I just wanted order, she muttered, voice breaking. I wanted rules. But her confession only earned more silence. The crowd wasn't with her anymore. They were with the officer. With the evidence. With reality. Karen swallowed hard, clutching her binder like a shield. Her once triumphant posture had collapsed into something hunched and desperate. She was unraveling and everyone knew it. The officer turned slightly, his radio crackling at his shoulder. Dispatch, I may need to escalate this. Can you advise on detainment procedure for HOA interference with protected state property? The neighbors gasped audibly as Karen's eyes widened, realizing her crusade might end not with victory, but with handcuffs. The cul-de-sac had turned into a theater. The flashing patrol lights were the stage and Karen, binder slipping from her arms, was the lead actress in a play she hadn't rehearsed for. Every neighbor was in the audience, some holding up phones like spotlights, others whispering lines under their breath. And the more she tried to salvage control, the more her grip slipped. The officer lowered the grainy photo he'd plucked from her hand and tucked it into her binder, which hung open like a broken jaw. He shook his head. Ma'am, this is not evidence. This is harassment. The words cut deep. Karen staggered back a step, her heels wobbling on the uneven driveway. Harassment? I'm enforcing the rules. That's my job. From across the street, someone muttered, It's not your job, it's your hobby, loud enough for the crowd to chuckle. Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. She spun on her heel toward the neighbors, binder pages fluttering to the ground again. You think this is funny? You think letting people break rules is funny? When your property values drop, when this place turns into a dump, you'll remember this night. Mr. Patel finally spoke, his voice steady. Karen, none of us asked for this. None of us wanted you to call a tow truck on your neighbor. Several people nodded, murmuring agreement. One of the teenagers raised his phone higher and said, Smile for TikTok, Karen, drawing a ripple of laughter through the group. Karen's eyes bulged. Delete that. You can't film me without permission. The officer interjected before the argument could spiral. Actually, ma'am, they can. This is a public situation and you created it. Everyone here has the right to record. Karen's lips parted in outrage. So you're all against me? Every single one of you? The silence that followed was answer enough. Even her allies, the couple from Birch Street who occasionally supported her at board meetings, were nowhere to be seen. She was alone, standing in the center of a circle of neighbors who'd grown tired of her crusade. The tow truck driver spoke up, his tone sharp now. Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you nearly dragged me into a mess I'd never dig my way out of. You don't know how close I was to hooking that SUV before I saw that plate. If I had, I'd be out of work tomorrow. You want to ruin people's lives to prove a point. Karen's voice cracked. It's not about ruining lives, it's about order. Without rules, everything falls apart. The officer shook his head slowly. No, ma'am. What falls apart is trust. And right now, you've lost the trust of this entire street. Karen's breath came fast, shallow, panicked. She clutched her binder to her chest like a child clutching a toy. The crowd's eyes bore into her, every phone recording her unraveling in real time. I stepped forward, calm but firm. Karen, you could have knocked on my door. You could have asked. Instead, you called a tow truck, dragged the police out here and tried to humiliate me in front of my neighbors. But all you've done is humiliate yourself. The neighbors murmured louder now, some nodding, some clapping softly. A woman down the block called out, "We're tired of this, Karen. We're tired of you." Karen's voice shrilled higher, desperate. No. You need me. Without me, this neighborhood will turn into chaos. You'll see. The officer stepped between us again, his hand resting on his belt. Ma'am, that's enough. You've made your point. And it's not the one you think. Karen's shoulders sagged, but she still tried to salvage some control. Fine. Fine. But when the board meets next, we'll revisit this. We'll revisit all of you. The officer cut her off firmly. No, ma'am. What's going to happen next is you're going to calm down, you're going to step away from this driveway, and you're going to answer to a complaint for harassment. That's what comes next. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked around, desperate for an ally, but all she saw were neighbors shaking their heads, eyes full of disappointment, or worse, pity. The tow driver muttered, "Should have just minded your business," loud enough that the crowd chuckled again. Karen's humiliation was complete. Her reign as HOA tyrant wasn't ending with a gavel in a boardroom. It was ending on asphalt, under flashing lights, with the entire neighborhood recording her downfall. The officer turned to me. Sir, do you want to press charges? You're within your rights. I looked at Karen, her trembling hands, her binder hanging half empty, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. Part of me wanted justice, but another part knew this was punishment enough. Not tonight, I said quietly. But if it happens again, I'll reconsider. Karen's jaw dropped, as if mercy was somehow more humiliating than punishment. The officer nodded, then turned back to Karen. Ma'am, I'm filing a report. You'll hear from us soon. For now, stay put until we're done here. Karen froze, binder clutched to her chest as the officer reached for his radio again. The crowd leaned in, waiting to see if the cuffs would finally come out. The cul-de-sac felt balanced on the edge of a knife. Neighbors pressed closer, their phone screens glowing like fireflies, recording Karen's downfall from every angle. The officer's voice had been final, his warning clear, but Karen wasn't wired for surrender. Not after years of clinging to the title HOA president, like it made her queen of the block. She stood rigid in the wash of police lights, binder sagging in her arms, hair coming loose at her temples. Her breaths came in sharp bursts, and her eyes locked not on the officer or the crowd, but on my SUV. The plate gleamed again in the flashing red-blue, a quiet reminder of the authority she could never touch. And yet she decided to try. Karen let the binder slide from her hands. Papers scattered across the asphalt again, but this time she didn't care. She took one long, deliberate step toward the SUV, her hands trembling, then another. The officer barked, "Ma'am, stop right there." But Karen didn't stop. Her face twisted, desperate, frantic. "If nobody else will enforce the rules, then I will," she shouted, and she lunged forward, fingers stretching for the plate as if tearing it off would undo everything. Erase the truth, restore her power, prove she'd been right all along. The crowd gasped in unison. A woman down the block screamed, "Karen, no!" The officer reacted instantly. His hand shot out, grabbing Karen's wrist just inches from the plate. Her nails scraped the metal, but she couldn't get a grip. The officer yanked her backward, spinning her around in a practiced motion. "Hands behind your back," he snapped. Karen thrashed wildly, kicking against the concrete, her voice shrill. "You can't. I'm the president. I am the rules. The officer's patience had ended. He forced her arms behind her back as the cuffs clicked into place. The sound echoed across the street, louder than the tow truck's idle, louder than the neighbors' whispers. The crowd erupted, not in shock but in applause. Some clapped slowly, sarcastically, others cheered outright. Phones rose higher, capturing Karen bent over, wrists locked, her reign reduced to nothing more than a spectacle under flashing lights. The tow driver muttered, shaking his head, "Told you this wasn't worth it?" He turned to me, voice low but audible. "Never seen someone dig their own grave this fast." Karen writhed against the cuffs, binder forgotten at her feet. "You'll regret this. All of you. You think you're safe just because of some plate? I'll make sure the board comes for you." The officer guided her firmly toward the curb. "Ma'am, you've escalated this beyond repair. You're under arrest for obstruction and attempted tampering with state property." Her eyes widened, her voice cracking. "Tampering with state property? You can't be serious. I was just. The officer cut her off. "You were warned. Multiple times. Everyone here saw it." Karen's knees buckled slightly as he sat her down on the curb, cuffs still biting her wrists. She looked around wildly, desperate for even one sympathetic face. But all she saw were neighbors shaking their heads, whispering, recording. Mr. Patel called out softly, not unkindly, "Karen, sometimes rules aren't the problem. Sometimes it's the person enforcing them." Her eyes filled with tears, but her pride wouldn't let them fall. She sat stiff, lips trembling, binder papers fluttering around her like confetti marking the end of her rule. The officer turned back to me, his voice quieter now. "Sir, you'll need to sign a brief statement before we wrap this up. Do you want to press additional charges?" I glanced at Karen, sitting small and broken on the curb, her authority in tatters. I shook my head. "No. Tonight's enough." He nodded. "Fair enough. But the harassment report will stand." Karen flinched at that, as if the word harassment carried more weight than the steel on her wrists. The tow driver began packing up his gear, chains clattering back into place. "Guess my night's over too," he said, half relieved, half weary. He shot me a nod. "Good thing I trusted my gut, huh?" "Good thing," I agreed. The neighbors lingered, unwilling to leave before the curtain fell completely. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, whispering questions. A teenager narrated into his phone, "She actually got cuffed. Like legit cuffed. You can't make this up." Karen twisted on the curb, her voice breaking as she tried one last desperate plea. "Listen to me. He's not who you think he is. He's tricking all of you." But no one listened. The louder she shouted, the smaller her voice became against the weight of truth. The officer leaned down beside her. "Ma'am, I strongly suggest you stay quiet until we finish. You've already done enough damage to yourself tonight." Karen bit her lip, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She turned her face away from the cameras, but it was too late. Her humiliation was sealed. As the officer stood and radioed for backup transport, headlights appeared at the far end of the street, another patrol car arriving. The neighbors murmured louder, waiting to see if Karen was about to be taken away in front of the entire block. The second patrol car rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac, headlights sweeping across the gathered crowd. The murmurs of neighbors swelled again, everyone leaning closer, eager to witness the final act of Karen's unraveling. The red and blue strobes bounced off garage doors and trimmed hedges, painting the whole street like a stage set for her downfall. Karen sat on the curb, wrists cuffed behind her back, her binder sprawled open on the pavement. Her hair clung to her damp forehead, and though her voice had finally broken into silence, her eyes still darted with the frantic energy of someone searching for a lifeline. But none came. The second officer stepped out, younger, his expression curious but stern. He scanned the scene, tow truck idling, SUV gleaming quietly, neighbors filming, and then his gaze landed on Karen. "What VE we got?" he asked, voice clipped. The first officer replied evenly, "HOA president initiated a tow on a state-issued vehicle. Ignored multiple warnings, attempted to tamper with protected property. She's being detained for obstruction." The younger officer raised his brows slightly, then looked at Karen. "You picked the wrong fight tonight, ma'am." Karen's lip trembled. "It's not fair. None of you understand. He's dangerous. He doesn't belong here." The crowd scoffed. One man shouted from across the street, "The only dangerous one here is you." A ripple of agreement followed, neighbors nodding, muttering words like embarrassment and about time. The tow driver shook his head, wiping grease from his hands onto his uniform. Never thought I'd see the day someone tried to drag the governor's office into an HOA dispute. You're lucky he doesn't hear about this himself. Karen snapped her head toward him. Don't you dare bring him into this. This is about neighborhood standards, not politics. The officer cut her off. This is about your behavior, ma'am. And tonight it crossed the line. The neighbors applauded softly, not out of cruelty but in relief. Years of whispered frustrations, fines slipped under doors and threatening emails from Karen had all led to this moment. It was justice, visible and undeniable, right there in the glow of police lights. The first officer crouched beside me, paperwork balanced on his knee. Sir, before we clear the scene, I'll need a statement for the report. Just a brief summary of what happened from your perspective. I signed calmly, my pen stroke steady despite the chaos around us. When I handed the clipboard back, I caught Karen's eyes. She was staring at me, broken but still defiant, like she couldn't comprehend that the story had slipped from her hands. You'll regret this, she whispered. I shook my head. No, Karen. You will. The officer guided her to her feet. She stumbled, her sandals scraping against the asphalt, and the neighbors gasped at the sight of her cuffed hands gleaming under the streetlights. The officer steadied her, leading her toward the patrol car. Phones tilted up, capturing her walk of shame. Some neighbors muttered softly, others stood in stunned silence. One teenager whispered to his friend, "This is going viral before midnight." Karen twisted once more, shouting over her shoulder. You're all blind. Blind to the corruption on this street. The officer pushed her gently into the back seat of the patrol car, her words muffled as the door shut. The sound of the latch echoed across the cul-de-sac, final and decisive. The younger officer turned to the crowd. Show's over, folks. Please return to your homes. We've got it from here. But no one moved right away. They lingered, savoring the sight of Karen's authority finally collapsed, her binder pages scattered like debris after a storm. The tow driver climbed back into his truck, shaking his head. Before starting the engine, he leaned out the window and called to me. You ever need a tow for real, give me a call. No charge. Consider it an apology for almost letting her drag me into this mess. I smiled faintly. Appreciate that. He drove off slowly, chains clattering, amber lights fading into the night. The sound was like a curtain lowering on the chaos. The officers wrapped up their conversation with dispatch, then approached me one last time. Sir, you're clear. We'll follow up if needed. Thank you for your patience tonight. Thank you for handling it professionally, I replied. As the patrol cars prepared to leave, the neighbors began dispersing, murmuring excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. Some offered me nods of solidarity. Mr. Patel clasped my shoulder. Don't let her shake you. Tonight, the whole street saw who she really is. I nodded, watching as the patrol car with Karen inside rolled down the street, its lights dimming. Her face was just visible through the glass, tear-streaked, humiliated, but still burning with a spark of resentment that refused to die. Just as the patrol car disappeared around the corner, a local news van turned onto the street, its headlights sweeping over the neighbors. The side door slid open and a reporter stepped out with a microphone in hand. The crowd erupted again. Karen's humiliation wasn't just recorded by neighbors anymore. Now it was about to hit the evening news. The cul-de-sac had almost returned to stillness, except for the low hum of conversations rippling between neighbors. Patrol cars were preparing to pull out, their lights still strobing against garage doors, when the unmistakable sound of a news van rolled in. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising again. A white van with a bold local news logo eased into the curb, its headlights catching the scattered papers Karen had dropped. The side door slid open and a young reporter in a blazer stepped out, microphone in hand, followed by a cameraman hoisting a shoulder rig. Neighbors gasped. A few chuckled nervously. One man whispered, "This is about to go citywide." The reporter scanned the scene quickly, the patrol cars, the SUV, the tow truck leaving in the distance. Then her eyes landed on me. She strode forward with professional urgency. "Sir, can you tell us what just happened here tonight?" Karen, still in the back of the patrol car, slammed her cuffed fists against the window. Her muffled voice echoed faintly, "Don't talk to them. It's all lies." But her words only underscored her helplessness, trapped behind glass while the cameras rolled. I took a breath, steady. What happened tonight is simple. A neighbor let power go to her head. She thought rules gave her authority over people instead of responsibility to them. And when she crossed the line, the truth came out. The reporter nodded gravely. "And the vehicle, there are reports it's tied to the governor's fleet?" I didn't elaborate, just glanced at the plate gleaming under the streetlights. The facts speak for themselves. The cameraman panned across the SUV, the insignia visible for a flash before the officer stepped in to block further filming. "That's enough," the officer said firmly. "This isn't for broadcast." But it was too late. Every neighbor's phone had already captured the plate, the arrest, the confrontation. By morning, the story would be everywhere, part HOA drama, part political oddity, and part small-town spectacle. Karen pounded the window again, her eyes wild. "I'm the president. You can't show this. I'll sue you all." Her words rang hollow, drowned out by the buzz of conversation and the steady hum of the camera. The officer opened the passenger door of his patrol car, nodding to the reporter. "We'll have a statement for you tomorrow. Tonight's over." The reporter turned back to me one last time. "Anything you want the community, or the city, to take away from this?" I glanced at the neighbors gathered in the glow of street lamps, faces tired but relieved. "Yeah. Rules matter, but people matter more. When someone uses rules to bully instead of build, everyone loses." Tonight showed that no one is above the law, not even the self-appointed rulers of a neighborhood. The reporter gave a small nod and the cameraman lowered his rig. The moment was sealed. The officers slid into their cars, engines revving. The patrol car with Karen inside rolled forward, taillights glowing red. Through the glass, her face looked pale, her lips moving silently, still trying to fight a battle she had already lost. Then the car turned the corner, disappearing into the night. The neighbors clapped softly, a scattered, hesitant applause. It wasn't joy, not exactly. More relief. Catharsis. The end of something that had hung over them for too long. Mr. Patel turned to me, smiling faintly. "Peace will return now, I think." I nodded. "It already has." One by one, the neighbors drifted back into their homes, porch lights flicking on as if signaling the end of a show. The street quieted. The only sounds left were sprinklers hissing and crickets resuming their rhythm. I stood by my SUV, the plate catching the last pulse of a fading patrol light. 4 months, Karen had turned this neighborhood into a battlefield of fines, warnings, and whispered threats. But tonight, under the scrutiny of flashing lights and rolling cameras, her empire of binders and bylaws had crumbled. For the first time in a long time, the cul-de-sac felt like a neighborhood again. I turned toward the camera still filming from across the street, one of the teenagers live-streaming the whole thing. I spoke directly, knowing the footage would travel farther than I ever could. "What would you do," I asked softly, "if your neighbor called a tow truck on you for no reason?" The teen grinned and ended the stream, satisfied. As I walked back toward my porch, I felt the weight of the night finally lift. Karen was gone, the SUV was untouched, and the neighborhood had witnessed justice with their own eyes. Sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or board meetings. Sometimes it comes in driveways, under the glare of tow truck lights and the relentless eye of a cell phone camera. And tonight it came here. I opened my front door, the house warm and quiet inside. I set my keys on the counter, poured what was left of my cold coffee down the sink, and let out a long breath. The fight was over. At least for now. And that's how the loudest voice on our block fell silent. Karen thought she could control the neighborhood with binders and threats, but the truth and the law had other plans. Sometimes the best defense is patience, sometimes it's evidence, and sometimes it's just letting someone dig their own grave. What do you think? Was I right not to press charges? Or should I have pushed harder after everything she put us through? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy real neighborhood stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time, because there are always more tales hiding behind closed doors.